guys, and welcome to a new video. So I mentioned in a video last week how I struggle with poetry, and I know that I had talked about it in the comments with Josh on something from Literary Gladiators. I'll link their channel down below. Lovely people, they have way more viewers than we do. But I wanted to talk about poetry because I read another poetry book this month, that being What Kind of Woman by Kate Baer, and this cover is beautiful. I love the cover of it. But I struggled with it, and I'm going to talk about this and a couple of the other poetry books that I've read throughout my experiences, and maybe talk about why that is. I talked about this book with Gretchen when we were just chatting, and my general opinion of this was like 3 stars. It's about womanhood, motherhood, and being a wife, and it's fine. But I had feelings with this that I have had with most of the modern poetry that I have read in my lifetime, which is basically, okay. I read all of the poems. They have opinions. They talk about the human experience, what it's like to be whatever, especially women, but I wasn't like moved. I don't think anything new was said. I don't even think really anything interesting was done with the structure. There were multiple times in this where like a line would break in a weird place with like a preposition at the end. And there's times when it was done really well where like one line ended with a thought and then continued that thought, changing it in the next line, which is I think what you're supposed to do when you break a line. It's like have these connected in an interesting way that makes the statement like 2 different statements, and that's interesting. But sometimes it would just have like when at the end and then continue the thought in the next line, and I'm like, why break the line? It's just weird. So 3 stars. It's fine. It's good. If you like internet poetry, that's what this feels like. Before that, a couple years ago, I read these 2, Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur and The Princess Saves Herself in This One by Amanda Lovelace, both of which are very similar things. Internet poetry, feminist, talking about what it's like to be a woman in the modern world. And I had similar feelings. I liked these both better than I liked What Kind of Woman. I don't think that I had the same experience where I was like, why did you break the line where you broke the line? Like, I didn't have that experience with these. And I get why they're as popular as they are. This one obviously is one of the most popular poetry books in the last couple of years for sure. This one is also quite popular in the same sort of community. But I have the same feeling of, okay, I read it, you were saying things, I don't think anything interesting really was done with this. I don't think it did anything new. It didn't confuse me. I read it, I got the point, I got there, it was cool, okay. And then I continued on my way, reading them in one sitting, like all the way through. I didn't really feel like I needed to sit and think about those books anymore, or any of the poems. They didn't sit with me and like hit me in a really strong way, which is what I thought that poetry should do. In college, I took 3 or 4 poetry classes, reading poetry and trying to understand it, because I always felt like I wasn't good enough or smart enough to read it. Like I would read it and miss things, and I would make a comment in class and the teacher would be like, no, it's really this, it's really this. And maybe it was just the poetry teacher that I had, and he was very strict on the meanings behind poems, like there was a right way to read poetry, and I wasn't reading it the right way, and that's why I felt like I had to keep taking it to try and change my brain to read it the right way. And obviously there are meanings in poems and hidden things in poems. Like if I broke out my old Norton anthology of poetry, like a lot of those poems were very meaningful. Each word was picked purposefully. The structures were very important. All of those things. And I enjoy reading them and like dissecting them. But I don't find that in modern poetry. It's kind of the opposite, where with older poetry, I feel not good enough, like I'm missing things, I'm not reading it correctly. And with modern poetry, I get it. I completely get it. I read it and I don't have to think about it at all. And there is no happy medium for me in that, where I'm like, this is cool and smart, and I feel like I have to, it's a puzzle I have to unlock, but at the same time, you know, it's like comprehensible. I'm able to take it in and know that I'm reading it correctly and know that I'm getting the right thing out of it. So who knows here, you know, poetry is subjective. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the weird one here. I don't know if other people have the thoughts. I know there's people who really love the modern poetry because of how comprehensible and clean that it is. It gives access to poetry that a lot of other people wouldn't have, because that older poetry is very stuffy and very academic. There's a lot of like regular people who are reading internet poetry. It's meant to be consumed by the masses, and maybe that's the interesting thing about it, that it is really an art form for the masses, where poetry before was quite stuffy and academic and an art form and held up and literary, and now it's being used by everybody. I don't know, like, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because everybody should be able to enjoy art. Everybody should be able to enjoy poetry if they do, and maybe I'm the weird one here and I just feel unsatisfied by that. I don't know. Talk to me. Like, what do you think? Do you have the same feelings? Do you feel like there's nothing new happening in poetry, or the new thing is that it's streamlined? The only modern poetry book that I was introduced to in college by one of my professors that I think was doing something interesting is Alien vs. Predator by Michael Robbins. I think I have a review of this up. I'm not positive, because it would have been like way back at the very beginning of our channel, if I do. He uses lines from movies and TV shows, like the actual like lines that are recognizable, and chops them up and puts them all together to talk about something. So the poem is about something else, but it's using all of these pop culture lines that you would recognize and know, okay, that's referencing Silence of the Lambs, that's referencing a pop song that everybody knows, or most people might know, that are of the millennial generation, maybe even Gen X. And that was very interesting and new, and I quite liked that. It felt postmodernist. We're breaking the way that we write poetry and doing something completely new. But I haven't seen this replicated anywhere else. Like, it's not caught on as a phase or a fad in poetry. It's just this one book, or this one poet. And it was cool and interesting, and it made me think, and I did have to dissect it and try and figure out what all of those references were. But it's not like the common thing, and I don't think most people even know about this book. I don't know how many people have heard of this book, and maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, I don't know. I don't know if this has moved into literary circles. I don't think so, because using pop culture is another way that it's sort of being brought down, to become more clandestine, maybe? What are your thoughts? Do you prefer old classic poetry, the like very academic, very stuffy, very verbose type of poetry where every word choice is very particular? Do you like this newer kind of internet poetry, this like very accessible, very comprehensible poetry that you don't have to dissect? Do you have feelings about the structure like I do, where like when you see a preposition at the end of the line it feels weird and uncomfortable, like why did you break it there, why didn't you start with that? Do you have those feelings, or do you not even notice that? I know people who write poetry probably have a lot more opinions on the structure than I do. I might not even be seeing structural things, because I only have taken poetry as a literature course, like a ingesting of it, and not so much a creation of it standpoint. I just figured I would talk about that in more detail, because it's something that I obviously still dip into. I have all of these poetry books and I try them, but I haven't felt satisfied with any of them. And then with the old stuff, I feel I'm not good enough to I'm not good enough to do them. I'm not good enough to fully understand them on my own. I need somebody else to help me dissect it. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you read poetry? Do you care? Give me some of your poetry recommendations down below, because obviously that's just a handful of books. I have not read like a vast amount of poetry. It's something that I still only like dip my toe in when I hear something that's quite popular, or I see like a cover that stands out. I will talk to you again next week. I hope you guys are doing well and having lovely lives. I am going to add a link in the description to talk about the Israel-Palestine, I'm going to say genocide, because I've heard people say that the news using crisis to talk about it is kind of demeaning. There's a lot of folks here in America who haven't heard a lot about it, even though it's been going on for quite some time now, and it's sort of being minimized, and a lot of the times people here also are saying, well, what do we don't really have any say in that because we're in America, like we're not part of Israel, we can't really do anything. But America actually has a lot of funding going towards Israel and, you know, helping the Israeli army and everything that's going on over there. So there are things that we can do with our representatives to help, maybe not in the short term, but in the long term, and also just to learn about what's going on over there. So I'm going to link that down below, add it to the other links that we have down there with any of the other things that are going on in the world. Gretchen pre-filmed a lot of her videos for this month, so you're not going to see her talk about it, but it will be down in the description of some of these videos. So I just figured I should add that in too, because I cried yesterday when I saw a video of children and the pain that they're having, and I feel like I can't do very much from where I am, but there's people who have kindly put together resources that are things that we can do. So yeah, if you feel like me and you want to try and help somehow, or at the very least educate yourself, those links will be down in the description. Talk to you again soon.